On a previous occasion, Einar Tangen, an expert on a Chinese policy, shed the light on the Chinese political system and the American political system, and he was more positive on the advancement and the future of the Chinese system more than the American system. Now we are going to get a more look or another look from the Western side of things with William. William, could you please, like the first question here is like, does Biden policy change towards China?
Directly, not likely, indirectly, dramatically. When I say the not likely, he likes to sit at Biden likes to sit at the head of the table. He likes to look at as being the head of an international cooperative unit. But at the same token, when he's sitting in front of them, or his Secretary of State is sitting in front of them, they're very easily just berated. They're somewhat fearful, and that's not very helpful when you've got China. So what you're going to see is Trump, who people thought was a bully, but the Chinese really were concerned that he would do something. And so that if you had, let's say, the Chinese decide to take Taiwan, they really wouldn't know what Trump did and they'd be hesitant. With Biden, there are so many things holding him back. One, there's this tendency of people aren't really sure who's running it. We really don't hear much from him. And when you hear from Biden, you don't hear a lot of substance. You don't hear much from the vice president at all, no matter what she's assigned. And we're put into a position where we're not really sure, but I think that they view Biden as weak, which is a serious problem, especially because of China's long-term goals of literally being the economic power of the world, and maybe the military power too, probably.
So you mean that, like, let's say the new administration in the U.S. is more lenient than the Trump administration?
They are. They're going to leave some things in place, like some of the sanctions. They're going to leave them there. But when you think about the overall policy that the U.S. is pursuing, let's just pull it apart with a few things. We're going to sit here and say we're going to be strong on China, but you've still got the Hunter Biden problem. You're going to sit there and say we're going to take on China economically, but we're going to do the Green New Deal. Let's just take the Green New Deal. That's something that does nothing but helps China. The solar panels are going to be made in China. The rare earths are going to come out of China. So when you have all of that, we're going to end up buying Chinese products, and we're going to be paying our workers to install them. But what happens is our workers aren't going to be paid nearly as much as, let's say, the workers on the pipelines. We're going to put the workers in a position of what happens 20 years from now when the solar panels and the wind farms are obsolete. Who's going to take care of all that hazardous waste with all the metals in there? So we're buying a huge problem. The second problem we're buying is the climate change. They're going to cut a deal. John Kerry has won a climate change for 30 years, a climate change law, or regulation, or a treaty, or whatever. And he's failed. He's failed because everything he's tried has really been foolish. And when you get to the climate change, Kerry's going to sign off on a deal, or Biden's going to sign off on a deal, which puts the United States into a commitment that it's going to continue to reduce and reduce and reduce emissions. But China's in a position where it's going to continue for the next 30 years emitting and building coal-fired power plants. So what does that do? Makes Chinese labor cheap, makes Chinese manufacturing very cheap because they don't have the emissions requirements, makes the United States very expensive, and it makes the energy we use very expensive. How at the end of the day does that put the Americans in a competitive position?
So let me ask you this, like, very clear. So you support Einar's point of view that the Chinese economy is on a better ride than the American economy?
Well, the Chinese, I think the Chinese are more focused on what they're trying to achieve. And to be very honest with you, it's very easy when you're a totalitarian or an authoritarian government. They control the business there. They control who gets loans. The political party, the Chinese Communist Party, is now infiltrating all the businesses there. They've got slave labor with the Uyghurs. So they've got a system that is absolutely repulsive to Americans. And we need to be saying that, because if the fight's going to be over ideology, then the Americans need to win on ideology. We need to, at home, we need to walk the walk, and we're not doing that. So what's happening is the Chinese are sitting there focused on a long-term plan of how they're going to become the military and the economic leaders of the world. The United States is so busy giving out money to bankrupt labor unions, bankrupt cities, bankrupt states. We just spread money around. So when the Chinese go and they do their Belt and Road Initiative, they put $1 trillion into 100 countries. When we spend $5 trillion, we just distribute it to whoever wants money. And long term, that's going to hurt the United States. The United States has to get back to what it's really strong at. It's strong at letting the people have a say in the system. It's strong on the thought of and the experiment of democracy. It's strong on those things. It's always been strong when it's had a strong dollar. It's always been strong when it's managed its economy and the money and the budgets, and we haven't been in $30 trillion in debt. And so what's happening is you're seeing a fight going on right now, or a competition between the Chinese and the Americans. The Chinese have a very focused point, and the Americans have lost focus. One of the things that Trump did, whether you like Trump or you didn't like Trump, is he had a focus. He lowered the regulations. He cut the taxes. He made America very competitive. And for whether you like him or not, putting all that aside, the fact is that he made America competitive. We're now in a position where we're going to have spent $5 trillion literally in under 6 months. Think about that. $5 trillion. And we're going to have nothing to show for it. And they're talking about a Green New Deal and climate change and all of these social programs. Obama tried that, and they were all a failure. When Obama started doing these programs, virtually everyone in Washington, D.C. said there are no shovel-ready projects. Anyone who knows anything about shovel-ready projects knows the second an industry gets a permit, they build, because they know that permit may not be good the next day. So there aren't any shovel-ready projects. So what we're doing right now is we're distributing an enormous amount of money, and no one knows where it's going to go. No one even can count to $30 trillion or even to 5.
So my question here, let's look at the stability and the strengths of the Chinese system and the American system. Do you think this Chinese system is stronger currently?
Well, it's strong because it's authoritarian. It's strong because it determines where every penny in the system goes. It's strong because it doesn't allow for free speech or different ideas. But what happens over time is the people just get frustrated and they can't live with it. That's why you have revolutions. And one of the things that the Chinese, I think, really have to fear, and why they're so authoritative, is because they know the only thing that's keeping the people basically civilized in the country is fear. They can't speak, and they're put into a position where they have to take whatever jobs they get. And your other guest was talking about how they really have brought so many millions out of poverty. The average American household of 4, it makes 8 times what the Chinese make. It's a huge difference. Most Chinese work on subsistence wages. The poorest American who gets food stamps and unemployment and everything else is probably making $40,000 or $50,000. Has color TVs, has a car, has a walk phone, has an iPhone. Is it good what they have? No, but the American enterprise system historically has brought far more wealth to people. The risk we have now, the real risk, which is why I wanted to come on the show, the real risk is our debt. If we can't get a handle on our debt and interest rates go up, we're not going to be able to do it. And if you want to go through all the countries that have collapsed, or all the empires that have collapsed, it's been because they've overextended militarily or financially, and we're moving in that direction. And somebody's going to have to say, we've got to begin getting under control. That's the flaw in what Biden's doing. He's viewing this as he's going to be the next Franklin Roosevelt, and he's going to rebuild the whole United States. Well, he's not going to. We're going to get into these, pothole projects, and nothing's going to come out of it for spending all these billions or trillions.
Okay, let's speak about the extension out of the United States, or let's say the outreach and the impact on other countries and other continents. Like China is now implementing the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa, and it is spending these millions, as you have just said, in investment, while America does not have this focus yet. Like, how do you compare the moves of the US and the China regarding Africa?
Well, Africa is a good example. I mean, I think to be very honest, I think some people think it's just another form of colonization. They're going into the country, they're taking their metals and their oil. Um, they're leaving them with maybe a road to the airport, but who does the road to the airport and the road to the energy facility help? It helps the Chinese get the minerals and materials out of the country. So that's the first thing. This isn't something. The second thing is that what China is doing, it's opening up vast markets. Africa is probably not probably, it is the fastest growing population in the world. They're increasing at 3 to 4 times what other countries are increasing, or other continents are increasing. So when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, China's again, you come back to being very smart. They've looked at it and said, we can put in some billions of dollars and we're going to get all the infrastructure we need to take out all the materials we want. That's just smart from their point of view. The country, when the China takes everything out, the country's going to be left with nothing, because China is not going to put in the kind of infrastructure that they need to put in for these people to work. They're going to put in the infrastructure to get to the mine. They're going to put in the infrastructure to get to the port, but they're not going to really help the citizens and the people who live there with the technology and the job creation that they have. So in that sense, it's smart. Unfortunately, I'll just say it, the Biden administration is doing a lot of very foolish things. We're taking trillions of dollars, trillions. If we had put $100 billion into Africa, we would be superstars over there, and they would want to deal with us because we have much more of a democratic form of government. But we're not. We're giving it to bankrupt labor unions and corrupt labor unions. We're spreading it out to states that are bankrupt. We're putting it into pension funds that the union chiefs have taken the money out of. We're just wasting ours. So it comes down to, the thing is, China is focused, but they can be focused because of an authoritarian government. We don't really have any government at all. What we have is a president who signs executive orders so he doesn't have to speak. We have no long-term focus, and we're not thinking about it at all. In the last campaign in 2020, and I'll blame, Trump and Biden and virtually every member of Congress, not one person running for re-election or running for election talked about the debt in the United States. And at the time of the election, it was about 23, 24 trillion dollars. Now it's pushing on 30 trillion. And that was just 4 or 5 months ago.
So let's go with this point a little further. Like Einar Tangen mentioned that China wants peace, wants improvement, and they build the infrastructure, they help these countries. However, America was always about war, about bullying other countries, and all of this political stuff. Like, how do you say the moves?
Well, the difficulty is how anyone could say China's only for peace. I mean, they've enslaved the Uyghurs. They've just ripped up the treaty with the UK. They've taken over Hong Kong. They're probably at some point in time going to do something with Taiwan. And it's just sitting there. So you've got 3 things. They've taken over the South China Seas. They've terrorized all of the countries in Southeast Asia. They've boycotted Australia. I don't know how much, it's a different kind of a war, but they're certainly doing it. And they're certainly doing it but their excuse is, well, it's all internal. The United States, on the other hand, we do, look, anybody who thinks that the war in Afghanistan that's been going on for 20 years it's a disaster. We've spent $5 or $6 trillion there. We've wasted a lot of money. We've sacrificed an enormous number of people, both through the dead and through the injured. We've hurt a lot of Afghanistans, but at the same time, we don't know how to get out of it. And some days you just have to begin asking very tough questions. And this comes back to my key point. It's you and I have talked about this before. It's why I wrote my book. Some days government just has to work. Government can't do everything. What's the function of the federal government? The federal government is to protect the United States and to protect the citizens of the United States. It's to have a strong currency. It's to make sure that commerce moves and that we have an international relationship with the rest of the countries of the world. All of these other programs where you go in and you give extra money to teachers so they can have 3 shields around them, or you want to give them daycare so that they show up to work, or you give them an extra bonus so that they feel good because they didn't feel good. And then when they don't come to work, then you just say, fine. Well, that's tens of billions of dollars right there. And we're just wasting it program after program after program. And we've just got to get back to just running the government of the United States as a government that takes care of the people.
Okay, let's go to another point here, especially on the economic system. Like in the US, it's more about capitalism. It's more about the people who have the money, who got more money. Like these people are driven by greed and by, let's say, expanding their own wealth at the expense of the other people. However, in China, it's more about socialism and more about giving an opportunity to everybody. How would you compare the circumstances in both nations?
Again, it comes back to the same question. You can talk about how China is trying to spread the wealth, but making a couple dollars a day isn't spreading the wealth. I mean, that's just, it may make you feel good to say something like that, but it's really a foolish remark. The average Chinese person still has a far worse lifestyle than the average American. So, I mean, we've got to get off that. Second, China right now, they have not liked capitalism very well. And I heard your guests talking about how they're socialist for the people, but capitalist for the small business. Most of the small businesses a small business in China can't even get a loan unless the government approves of it. So let's get off the fact that there's some kind of freedom there. Second, most of the larger corporations are now controlled by the Communist Party. So I'm not sure where all this goes. And again, it all hangs together for them as long as they have power. But what happens when something breaks? Look at the Russian Revolution in 1917. The people didn't want to fight for their country. This is what the Chinese have. This is the risk that they face. Because if something happens, they've got to hope that the people who are getting these minimum wages or these minimalist wages love the country so much that they're going to fight for it. Well, we have an older population in China. They're getting just as old as the United States. So let's put that on one side. The second thing is they've got a lot of different types of populations. You've got the Uyghurs who are enslaved. They're certainly not going to stand up for the system. You've got a lot of Muslims. They're not going to stand up for the system. Who at the end, when things get really bad, what's the core there? And the core right now is the Communist Party and the control they have. In the United States, yeah, do we have a lot of greedy people? Of course we do. Do we have a lot of billionaires? Yes, we do. But there are two things that are different. One is the vast bulk, and I'm talking 90% of the country. They're still making $50,000, $60,000 a year, and they've got cars. They have a good lifestyle. So it's not like that everybody's greedy. Now, if you talk about wealth inequality, absolutely, there is tremendous wealth inequality in the United States. If you look at, the tax reductions after 9/11, Bush gave the Treasury away. Trump gave the Treasury away. We keep on giving the Treasury away. We don't have a Treasury to give away anymore. And so they're going to have to begin dealing with this. But there are little things that they can deal with. Social securities, for example. Just, raise the amount that's taxed. Right now, if we only tax Social Security to $120,000, what about those tens of thousands of people who are making $1 million? They're not paying tax on the Social Security, and they're getting just as much as everybody else. So, I think that there are ways to do it. You could go to a flat tax so that you're able to spread it around. Right now, if you're a corporation, take corporations, Amazon, for example, I forget what it was, $114 billion in profits or something. They pay no taxes. I mean, this is insanity.
It
We
is.
go into we go into programs like opportunity zones, and the sole focus of the opportunity zone is to build and to create jobs in poor areas. What happens? All the hotels and the venture capital funds figure out how to go into these areas and turn them and gentrify them so that the rich can take over them. And we don't have a consistent policy, because when you have, just think about this, when you have somewhere around 220,000 regulations, their laws, another 50,000 statutes, who knows what's going on? How do you administer this? How do you administer all of those programs? And just think about it. In any given day, the government's administering everything from fish and endangered species to rocket ships and landing on the moon and Mars. I mean, we've got to get a focus on it. We've got to begin focusing on how it is we manage the country. This idea of having ideas, we don't need any more ideas. We don't need any more laws. We need somebody to come in and say, we're not going to have every single thing we want. We're not going to give away every single thing. And let's not, the southern border is another example. We have $30 trillion in debt. And it's costing us roughly on average, about $92,000 per immigrant who comes in. We don't have that money. We've got a pandemic here, and we're bringing in people who haven't even had their health tests. This just isn't management. I mean, this isn't even a question of, the immigrants have a great story to tell. They have a great story to tell. And it's terrible in the countries that they're living in. We've got to worry about whether or not we can manage this country for the next century, and we're not doing it. That's the single biggest problem. And that's why in my book I call them, what are they? It's reforming the cacistocracy. What's the cacistocracy? Ruled by the least able and least principled people. We've got to get control of the country, and that means the government has to manage, not just give money away.
Okay, my other question here is about future competition. Like now, take your time. Now we are seeing that industries, science, computer, artificial intelligence, everything is going to China because of the market conditions and the economy and the taxes and so on. Like, how do you see the future ability of the US in face of China?
Well, the US has, I think, probably the best universities in the world. It certainly has, I'm not going to say the smartest people, but the people in our science programs are just as smart as anyone else. The difference is we've been cutting back in the United States. We've been cutting back on research and development. We've cut it in the last 30 years. We've probably cut it in half. What has China done? China has sat there and said, where's the world going? First thing they say is 5G. Well, they look, how the Chinese look at 5G and they say, this is what's going to control artificial intelligence and quantum computing. The United States looks at 5G and says, God, you can get your television quicker and your phone quicker. And when you're walking around, you can see a television you can watch a television show while you're waiting for a bus. I mean, that's the difference in thinking. And again, it comes back to, we want everybody to have whatever they want. We want everyone to have rights. The Constitution doesn't say that. God didn't give all of us the same amount of money and wealth, or we would have done it. What he gave us is an opportunity to advance ourselves and to do progress. When a government gives away everything to the people and doesn't have a focus and just says, we don't really care, and the Chinese do, we've got a problem. And we've got to, again, come back to, why is the Chinese focusing on that? Because if they control artificial intelligence, they control quantum computing, they control all the communications of the world, they control cybersecurity, which is what 5G does, then how do you compete with them? You either have to do the same thing and make sure you get it, or they're going to eat your lunch. And this is the problem that we have, is that they are very focused, and we have lost it. I think that the best quote I've ever seen on this issue is from Benjamin Franklin, and he's a great inventor. But what he said is when the people, somebody asked him a question about, what kind of government you have. And he said, when the people of the United States find out that they can vote themselves money, the republic is gone. And that's where we are. The people are voting themselves money. And that's not the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government is to protect the American people. The role of the federal government is to make sure that we have a future and that we're secure. The role of the federal government is not to be a printing press that gives away money.
Let's go to another point here, like with the Chinese system, there is more focus, as you have just mentioned, and there is this unified view and this unified path for their future. However, in the US, it's more like a change, a ping pong game between the Republicans and the Democrats. Like how competitive are the two systems?
Well, I mean, well, first of all, again, we come back to as long as the Chinese can hold the system together, they can do whatever they want. In the United States, we don't have really any consistency. As you call it a ping pong match, what I call it is we're becoming a banana republic without any bananas to back our currency. And so we have to, again, begin figuring out what it is we're trying to do. If we know that the Chinese can control whatever it is they have, and we don't really know what their economy is. I mean, we assume we do. We're not sure. They're probably printing as much money as we do, and they've probably had as much of a pandemic as we have. It's just that their society is closed. The strength of our society is that we're still somewhat open. Even with cancel culture, we're still somewhat open. And the difficulty we have is Joe Biden just got elected president, and what his sole goal is not to run the government. It's just to destroy every single program that Trump put in, whether it's good or it's bad. Right now, they're now starting to come to understand that the wall really is needed. But why did we have to take it down? Why did he have to come in and in the first 2 weeks of his presidency, why did he have to come in and sign 42 executive orders that just stripped away every single thing that Trump did? A good government, a good manager, anyone who's running a program sits and says what's working and what's not. We don't have enough time. We're going to fix what needs to be fixed, and what's working, we're going to let it go. And he didn't do that. And but that goes back to what I've been saying the whole time, is it puts us in a position where we have no focus. All we have is a political feeling, an emotional feeling that we don't like this, so we're getting rid of it. There are a lot of things people don't like every single day, but you live with them because you don't have the time and the money to deal with them, and they're not worth it.
Right.
So anyway.
Okay. Yeah. It has been awesome as usual talking to you, William. Thank you so much for that.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me back.